From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to this special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Jade Nicole Yvonne. Cronkite News is dedicated to covering the Native American community, tribal lands, and issues impacting Indian affairs across Arizona and in the nation's capital. Tonight, a closer look at reports on Indian country.
A new study says that there are hundreds of missing or murdered Indigenous women in metropolitan areas that have gone unnoticed. Washington reporter Lillian Donahue has more.
The Urban Indian Health Institute surveyed 71 cities across the United States to highlight often underreported cases of violence against Native American women. Arizona was one of the top states with the most number of cases.
Nobody is looking for our women, and they are dying.
Abigail Echo Hawk spearheaded the study that captured the attention of senators of both parties. Researchers said they found more than 500 women in urban areas who were missing or murdered, but the crime is not reflected in any government database. The names of those lost are written on a skirt she carries.
The Jane Doe you see on this skirt, today is the anniversary of her death. She was from Tucson, Arizona. We don't even know her name.
By the study's estimate, Tucson has the second highest number of murdered Native women in the country. Arizona ranks top 10. Echo Hawk says misclassification and redacted police records couldn't paint the full picture.
When we did our public records request, some of the police departments didn't get us the information we would have liked. We need to know this information in order for us to really understand the depth of the issue.
We have to assume here that the 506 identified cases probably undercount the incidence of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in urban America.
Lawmakers are taking notice. North Dakota Senator Heidi Heitkamp is sponsoring Savannah's Act, which would require law enforcement to update entries for missing and murdered Native Americans across the country.
If we think we can solve a problem, you will never solve a problem you won't admit you have, that you don't have data on.
Barney Enos with the Gila River Indian community says he finds the numbers disturbing, but Savannah's Act is just a start.
As tribes, as agencies, we can do a lot more beyond the legislation. All of our efforts combined, we can work to combat those numbers and see a decrease in that.
In Washington, Lillian Donahue, Cronkite News.
When most people think about John McCain, they think about a former presidential candidate or a war hero. But the late senator found a home in the Senate Indian Affairs Committee, where he served advocating for Native rights for over 3 decades.
Give these kids a choice.
McCain served on the Indian Affairs Committee for 31 years and chaired the committee twice. But like all things, there were tough moments, leaving behind a mixed legacy among Indian country. But those who work with the committee described McCain's unwavering passion and energy he brought to each meeting.
He was also willing to help. He was also willing to roll up his sleeves and say, there's a problem, how we're going to fix it. So he was first to identify the issue and then lend just as much energy in solving it.
For over 3 decades, McCain helped pass legislation on water rights, gaming protections, and native language preservation, to name a few.
These innovative efforts.
Montana Senator Steve Daines says he's forever grateful for McCain's advocacy for Native tribes, not just at home, but nationwide.
He represents Arizona, I represent Montana, but he worked with me, and we solved the problem that the Northern Cheyenne tribe faced for over 100 years.
One of the great honors of my life has been to represent you, our Native American tribes in Arizona.
The National Congress of American Indians President Jefferson Keel said he did not always see eye to eye with the late senator. However, he said McCain always lent an ear and his heart to Indian country.
He never worried about whether it was going to be politically popular or unpopular. He didn't worry about that. He just did what was right.
Navajo Nation President Russell Begay echoed that sentiment in an interview with Arizona PBS's Jose Cardenas, saying he had a warm relationship with McCain, but with icy moments.
You know, we're friends. At the same time, we're both advocating for our people.
In Washington, Lillian Donahue, Cronkite News.
A Native American farm is doing more than producing crop. It's connecting the present with the past.
And it starts with indigenous foods. Reporter Emily Richardson explains how food is such an important part of Native American culture.
According to Ramona Farms, in the 70s, the tepary bean had nearly gone extinct, and tribal elders were urging farms to start growing the beans again. Ramona found a few seeds for both the white and brown tepary beans in her childhood home and says it became clear to her that her mission was to bring back the beans and the culture to her community.
Culture is to feed our spirits and to feed our souls and to feed our community. The food should be an absolute necessary part of that, and it is.
Ramona's daughter, Velvet Button, moved away from the farm in her 20s, but ended up returning because she loves her life on the farm and sharing the history behind the food they're growing.
I am very honored to be able to share that with people because I don't really get to see the hard work and the true love of the land that my parents have and that they've been able to maintain all of these years through all the struggles.
While Ramona Farms grows alfalfa and cotton, their passion project is the tepary bean.
Now, long ago, it was a staple food here at Hill River, but along with our diminishing farming practices, we lost touch with our tepary bean. My mom and dad worked really, really hard at packaging them so that we could make it available again to not only our community, but the world community.
According to the 2012 USDA Census of Agriculture, 56% of farmers in Arizona are Native American.
Something that Native American people do, not only in Hill River, but also in other tribes. That's how we survived. You know, we did the hunting of the animals. We grew our corn and our wheat, and that's how we actually survived.
Button believes Native communities have started to reconnect with their culture, partly because of the food sovereignty movement.
It has helped to connect us once again as Indigenous communities and helping to rebuild those foodways that we used to have. In any culture, the best way to not only share that culture, but to really know it and be a part of it is to eat it.
The USDA will be releasing a new agriculture census with an updated percentage of Native American farmers in 2019. In the Broadcast Center, Emily Richardson, Cronkite News.
It's a long way to go to make a point, but a handful of Navajo protesters took the trip to New York City to oppose a plan that could keep the coal-fired Navajo generating station open. Cronkite News reporter Ian Solomon has the story from New York.
Investment firm Avenue Capital says it's made no decision on the possible purchase of Navajo generating station, which is set to shut down next year. But that didn't stop Navajo Nation activists from traveling to New York today to protest the plan.
In doing so, he would be standing in the way of our plans and our efforts to try to transition the NGS site and the NGS plant to a renewable energy generation site.
Nicole Horseherder led a handful of protesters who say anything that keeps the coal-fired power plant in operation will continue polluting the air, while robbing the region of a chance to pursue clean energy.
They're polluting the air and they're using our water. We're going to be left without no water in the future for our young kids.
Many worry that closing the power plant and the affiliated Kayenta coal mine will worsen the already dire unemployment rate on the Navajo and Hopi reservations. Nicholas Ashley says that may be true, but there's more at stake.
Compared to the entire nation as a whole, it's only a fraction, and they're sacrificing that little bit of money for the entire life of our Navajo people back home.
Horseherder says the jobs will leave eventually anyway, whether someone buys the plant or not.
Coming in and trying to revive that power plant, he's only going to have a few more years. Doing so might make a profit, but in the long run, we're going to be in this exact same place again.
In New York City, Ian Solomon, Cronkite News.
The Navajo Nation has been looking for a buyer for the plant since last year. That's when the current owner, the Salt River Project, said the coal plant was no longer economically viable. The Navajo Nation office in Washington did not respond to a call seeking comment today, and Avenue Capital said it would have no comment on the plant or the protest.
2 Arizona State University professors put together a week-long camp that gives Native American high schoolers a taste of college life. Reporter Emily Richardson spoke with the founders of the Native American Summer Arts Workshop about how this program is making a difference.
Jacob Metters is a member of the Machupta Indian tribe of Chico Ranchero, California. He is also a local artist and professor at ASU, and says when he was in school, a program like his summer arts workshop could have helped him.
I was a young Native student who didn't have a mentorship and didn't have really anybody that was around me that could kind of show me the way to get into college, to get into an art program. And the resources that were in school tended to be not geared to help me.
The Native American Summer Arts Workshop allows high schoolers from Arizona tribes to live in the dorms, eat in the dining halls, and take courses as if they were in college. But to Jacob Metters, what makes the program stand out is the relationships between the students and staff.
We offered all of them a mentorship as well, so if they want to pursue college in the arts, we're there. If they want to pursue college, we're there.
This isn't just a week of college experience for the students, but the relationships they develop here will be one that lasts into the future.
According to a report from UCLA and Penn State, Indigenous students have a higher dropout rate than any other ethnicity. The founders believe creating relationships with the Native American tribes and helping increase the number of students who seek higher education is a good way to honor their communities.
This is something that the state of Arizona, through its educational institutions, can do to build a strong relationship with those tribes, to build goodwill with those tribes, to help them to succeed on their own terms in the future.
I think sometimes the little things have a great effect, and you know, maybe this inspires another school, another program to do something similar. That would be cool. You know, ASU doesn't have to do it all.
Metters also believes that an important part in helping fix the education crisis that Indigenous communities face is for all people to be taught the history of their communities. Emily Richardson, Cronkite News.
If you're looking for one show that tells you what happened that day in the world of business, it's NBR.
We saw a classic shipwreck.
Nordstrom's opening stores.
Triple-digit gains.
Crude climbs.
We're there to help our audience find new investment ideas.
The market still has room to go up.
Nightly Business Report is the longest-running business television program in history.
Weeknights at 10:30 on Arizona PBS.
Join us each week on Catalyst, the show that explores new advancements, technologies, and innovations at Arizona State University that are shaping the future for tomorrow and beyond. Catalyst, Wednesdays at 9, right here on Arizona PBS.
After seeing a lack of resources for urban Native business owners, one woman from ASU's American Policy Institute wanted to make a difference. Sammy Jeebers reports on how Indigenous entrepreneurs were able to add more tools to their belt.
It's music to the ears. Well, maybe not our ears.
Pour it in there and it creates a casting.
For Raquel Kemp, craftsmanship is just as important as blending in her culture.
It's all in my jewelry. Every single piece, it's, my heritage.
She runs an online business where she makes Indigenous woman-made jewelry and prints.
Everything that I would need to create is in this room.
She felt like something was missing for Natives and their small businesses.
Something to help us along the way, just to start us off. There really wasn't anything that I had found except for, the Inno nations.
I realized that there's nothing out there for tribal businesses.
Moore saw a lack of resources specifically for urban Native entrepreneurs. She started an initiative dedicated to supporting business owners.
We just wanted to serve the urban Native community and give them a place to call home.
8 businesses from surrounding states and multiple tribes came to ASU for intensive training in finance, marketing, and other areas.
Thank God I'm not the only person that feels this way.
And that just made me more confident as a business owner because I was like, okay, this is perfectly normal to feel like you have zero confidence and you're not doing a good job.
Mendez runs an event management company in Indian country, and just being able to relate to other tribal business owners just made all the difference.
That was probably another big thing that came out of Innovations with a network and just being able to talk to people.
They allow different resources available to all natives. Let's see what we can do with them today. I mean, that's what I have is my culture, and you know, I've kind of built my career, my business kind of around that, just because it means so much to me, and I wanted to kind of convey that through my jewelry.
And Kemp will be doing just that, with now even more tools on her work table. In Phoenix, Sammy Giebers, Cronkite News.
Right now, Morris is looking to start the next stage of the initiative with possibly more business owners in another round of entrepreneurs.
A record-breaking number of Native Americans ran in the midterm primaries. Now, Arizona is seeing more women than men running for seats at the state capitol. Sammy Giebers spoke with an Arizona state senator on her thoughts about this trend.
Jamasita Peshlakai is the first Native American woman to step into this building as an elected Arizona state senator. She came to the Arizona Senate in 2017. When you ask her why it took so long to have a Native woman in a seat, she tells you to look at the history books.
The day that Christopher Columbus stepped on the shores of the Americas, just that one first initial contact put us back as indigenous women to the back burner.
But now there are more Native women running for Arizona state legislative seats than men.
We're really taking back our power and being able to say, you know what, we have something great to contribute to this society.
A U of A law professor says this trend may have something to do with education.
I've taught law for 24 years. The percentages of Native women getting higher education degrees is very high. And so I do believe that they're motivated to seek leadership positions, tribal, state, and federal.
Sophie says attitudes toward Natives in leadership roles are shifting. And along with that change, more Native people are viewing themselves as leaders.
I never started out thinking that I was the material to be a state senator or a state representative. Changing of that mindset of what is possible was what the greatest challenge was.
And Peshlakai says that change will continue to gain momentum. In Phoenix, Sammy Giebers, Cronkite News.
The opioid epidemic, water resources, schools, native languages. The list of issues afflicting tribal communities is long, and tribal leaders were in Washington today asking for help with some of those problems. Imani Stevens is in our Washington bureau with details on the National Congress of American Indians Tribal Unity Impact Days.
Tribal leaders came from across the country to meet with and in some cases challenge their elected officials about problems facing Native Americans. And the Arizona officials I spoke with agreed that there are many challenges in Indian country. Representative Ruben Gallego was one of the many speakers who recited a list of issues.
What we want to see for our tribal countries are affordable health care, safe roads and bridges, well-funded schools, and a justice system that works for everyone, including the vulnerable and the marginalized.
But education was a major topic for Arizona lawmakers. Representative David Schweiker said the problems facing tribal schools are appalling and unacceptable.
We have to come up with a way to either find how do we get teachers who are willing to stay in the bottom of the Grand Canyon for more than a couple months, or we need to get the education side at BIA to be willing to enter this century of technology.
Gila River Indian Community Governor Stephen Rowe Lewis says it all comes back to funding or a lack of it.
There's been a scarcity of funds for education, whether at the state level or at the federal level as well.
Lewis says his tribe is working to make things better, but it's important that elected officials know that there are still challenges.
We're building a state-of-the-art school on the west end of our reservation right now, and so we have funding in an interior package right now that is going before the Senate. So
Schweiker says that when it comes to problems like a lack of qualified teachers in tribal schools, maybe it's time for new approaches.
But maybe the way we've been approaching it, it's time for a technology revolution.
Lewis said that it's important for members of Congress to hear firsthand about the problems that tribal citizens have to deal with day in and day out.
That's why it's so important that tribal leaders weigh in on these impact days when you have access to senators and congressmen. They're the ones that directly make those decisions.
Representatives who spoke to the group today said they've done their part, pointing to a list of 14 bills on Indian affairs that have passed the Senate and are awaiting action in the House. The Tribal Unity Days continue tomorrow. In Washington, Imani Stevens, Cronkite News.
Culture, not costumes. Protesters walked onto the property of an online retailer selling Halloween outfits that resemble Native American dress. Sammy Gieber spoke to those speaking out to protest these designs.
People, not costumes! People, not costumes!
Signs and petition in hand.
I have here a change.org petition with almost 23,000 signatures asking Yandy to retire their Native American costume line.
Would you please leave our premises? A group is advocating for this Phoenix-based online retailer to stop the sale of costumes they say exploits their culture.
These small things are not small.
Everything has meaning, even like colors and types of materials used.
Cher Thomas is in the business of making traditional Native clothing. And everything, from patterns to symbols, has meaning.
So when you go to make this clothing, you have to be very cognizant of those things.
So when Thomas sees companies like Yandy put out costumes resembling Native clothing, she describes it as disrespectful and believes it can perpetuate violence against Indigenous women.
You know, Native clothing is about sanctifying the individual. When companies like this use our traditional dressmaking and manipulates it, it feels dehumanizing.
So this is us speaking out as Native people.
Yandy has been in the spotlight before. In September, the company pulled a sexy costume resembling that of concubines in the Hulu series The Handmaid's Tale after social media outcry.
Handmaid's Tale is able to get more support from this company than actual people.
Yandy says on their website these sexy Native American costumes pay homage to the beauty of the tradition.
That it's not okay for you to costume us.
But protesters think otherwise. In Phoenix, Sammy Giebers, Cronkite News.
Yandy did not respond to requests for comment on the petition or the protest, but they did tell activists they appreciated their sentiments and understand that they have a right to express their opinions.
This past weekend, the ASU women's basketball team made the 5-hour trip to Window Rock, Arizona for a matchup against number 4 Baylor. But for the team, this trip was about more than just a game. Reporter Anthony Totri has the story.
No expensive shoes, no perfect hoops, and sometimes no court at all. But that doesn't stop the passion for basketball for those in Window Rock, the Navajo Nation capital.
If there's a basketball and a hoop, you can basically just play anywhere.
This past weekend, that passion was showcased on national television as fans packed Window Rock High School's 6,500-seat gymnasium for the showdown on the Res, a game between Arizona State and Baylor's teams. For many, it marked the first time they experienced Division I basketball. Although the game's significance can't be understated, it was about more than just basketball.
Having them here inspires me to go bigger, dream bigger, and just have a mindset that wherever you live, you can always achieve more than you think.
It's almost like every other house has a basketball hoop out front here, and that's because basketball on the Res is different than it is back in Phoenix. For many, it means everything here.
Coming to this community, it's like, wow, there's a lot of kids that you're really going to impact, and having this opportunity is just amazing.
The team's goal was to leave a lasting reminder that anything is possible. And if there's one piece of advice Coach Charlie Turner Thorne has for those on the Res, it's to follow the path that came before them.
They had a fire inside of them. They were hungry to do things that, they weren't sure they could do. I would tell them, it's okay if you don't think you can do it, but go for it.
With 5,600 in attendance and thousands of kids in the stands, the Sun Devils left those on the reservation with an experience unlike any other. In Window Rock, Anthony Totri, Cronkite News.
Thank you.
The Sun Devils were unable to beat the Bears, but Coach Turner Thorne believes what the team set out to do beyond the game was accomplished.
A Phoenix artist has a contemporary sound, but is using an ancient instrument.
Sammy Giebers has more on a local indigenous artist and his take on the Native American flute.
Randy Kemp admits that when he plays the Native American flute, it doesn't always have that traditional sound.
I understand some people don't even like the way I'm playing the flute music now because it's more of that contemporary, fast-paced, very like, what was that? 6, 7, 8 flutes that I have to keep in rotation.
He's self-taught and uses the contemporary sound of this ancient instrument in his group's latest album. His CD is now nominated for a Native American Music Award, but not before its release was put on hold.
I actually flatlined. In 2016, I had a heart attack.
Kemp's daughter, Raquel, remembers those times all too well.
There was just so much stuff that was unfinished, and I think maybe that's what, that's probably, why he pulled through too. Is the CD is, one of the things that he needed to do.
Kemp often alludes to issues natives face today in his music. And another problem, he says that he sees less and less people picking up the Native American flute.
It's thinning out. So I don't know what's happening, if it's because of the time involved that it takes to learn or having access to some of these flutes.
But he hopes that this ancient instrument that has been a part of history for thousands of years will continue to play a role today. In Phoenix, Sammy Giebers, Cronkite News.
Kemp's group Artificial Red is nominated for Best New or Debut Duo or Group of the Year for the Native American Music Awards for their work on their new CD, Res Radio.